Mr. Putin, I would like to make a question about the Korean Peninsula, which you mentioned many years ago. I accompanied you in your meeting with Kim Jong-un, and back then we thought that Koreans would not be so aggressive, but when their country is being threatened with their elimination, I don't think that they will go back, and the sanctions that are introduced do not help, and they're not helpful. What do you think? What Russia can do in order to settle this situation? How can we work with the Americans in order to resolve this issue? Well, you know,
Korea is issuing a new threat of military action against the U.S. The state news agency says Americans should expect to face an unimaginable strike at an unexpected time.
Have our land-based missiles with 4,500 meters. Those are very powerful systems indeed. And believe that we have evened out the situation, and if you do not like it and you want to withdraw from the treaty, for example our American partners, then on our part we have a simultaneous and immediate response,
A well-known East Asian security expert has made an explosive claim that China is arming North Korea. Speaking on the Fox Business Network on Wednesday, Gordon Chang said Beijing is weaponizing the North, providing equipment and technology vital to the regime's weapons program. Chang, who is best known for his book The Coming Collapse of China, says the ICBMs test fired by Pyongyang this year were transported by Chinese mobile launchers, while the regime's latest submarine-launched ballistic missiles were variants of a Chinese rocket. Nevertheless, in Chang's opinion, President Trump has taken necessary steps in dealing with China, backing secondary sanctions on entities engaged in business with North Korea.
Korea is issuing a new threat of military action against the U.S. The state news agency says Americans should expect to face an unimaginable strike at an unexpected time. The warning comes just 2 days after a North Korean official said a nuclear war may break out at any moment. Ben Tracy is in Beijing with how the provocative statements may be a response to naval exercises nearby. Ben, good morning.
Good morning. In this latest threat, North Korea also calls the U.S. and South Korea warmongers who may start a nuclear war. Now, this latest threat comes at a time which appears to be a lull in North Korea's missile tests. The country has not launched one in more than a month. but North Korea does appear to be clearly upset about joint military exercises that the U.S. and South Korean navies are currently conducting in waters off the Korean peninsula. This includes the USS Ronald Reagan aircraft carrier as well as Navy destroyers. Now, the U.S. military says these war games are designed to increase the readiness of U.S. and South Korean forces, but North Korea sees them as a rehearsal for an invasion. The North says these military exercises are driving the tension into the worst line of explosion and prove the U.S. and South Korea are attempting to ignite a war on the Korean peninsula. Now, the military exercises do end on Friday, but next week the U.S. military is planning to hold a rehearsal for how they would evacuate U.S. citizens from South Korea if a war did break out.
I've been just told that several hours ago the President of the United States, Donald Trump, in social networks has mentioned the cooperation between Russia and the United States in one of the most important areas, in the area of nuclear cooperation and interaction. Yes, this area is one of the most important in our relationship, taking into account the fact that both Russia and the United States have a great responsibility towards the world being the two major nuclear states.
This has been frequently stated in the UN. In the Non-Proliferation Treaty, the established powers have committed to working for a world without nuclear weapons. I can, and I don't speak on behalf of the committee, but in their statement, the committee said the Nobel Peace Prize, there was two issues that was lifted forth. One, bringing attention to the catastrophic humanitarian consequences of nuclear war. And I think this is something that cannot be stated too often. The use of nuclear weapons is totally unacceptable.
Mr. Putin, I would like to make a question about the Korean Peninsula, which you mentioned many years ago. I accompanied you in your meeting with Kim Jong-un, and back then we thought that Koreans would not be so aggressive, but when their country is being threatened with their elimination, I don't think that they will go back, and the sanctions that are introduced do not help, and they're not helpful. What do you think? What Russia can do in order to settle this situation? How can we work with the Americans in order to resolve this issue? Well, you know, the situation is quite dangerous. It talks about preventive and preemptive strike. We hear the hints or direct threats. It's very dangerous. I've mentioned it on numerous occasions. We don't know what North Koreans have hidden, and will they be able to hit all the facilities with one strike? I really have doubts. I don't think that it will be possible, but maybe theoretically. But it is very dangerous. Even if we assume that they're being tested there, and during those tests they're trying to know what they have hidden, they will not be able to know this. So there's only one way to negotiate, to demonstrate respect towards this country. I mentioned this in my address. And what could be the role of the Russian Federation? We can be mediators. We offered a number of joint trilateral projects. I mean, Russia, North Korea, and South Korea, railroads, different ways of transport. So we have to work, we have to abandon military rhetoric, and we have to realize that the situation is dangerous. We have to overcome our ambitions. We have to stop quarreling. So it's quite simple. I also recalled it, because back then we were able to agree that Korea would stop its nuclear program and weapons program, but then our American partners thought that they have to have more. Several weeks after this, they introduced additional sanctions, saying that North Korea can do even more, maybe, but they did not take these obligations. Then they withdrew from all the agreements and resumed their tests. We have to be restrained. We have to demonstrate restraint in all those issues. I think we are able to agree now as well as we did back then, and soon we'll have Olympic Games in South Korea. Will be threatened by something? Well, no, I hope that